central to their economy, especially since 2008 when they launched a big project to actually build more data centers, recognizing how good they were for the economy. But even since the 1990s, when we started laying down fiber optic cables in that area, really what they are and what the majority of data centers continue to be is they service just regular functions that we have every day. So phone calls you make, the internet that you use, if you send an email, everything has to go through a data center, everything that is internet connected. So that's what most of the data centers are. Now, I think we are hitting an inflection point because we are seeing that more AI data centers are popping up. They do use more resources, but there are a lot of steps that companies are taking to make sure that that impact is reduced for the community. So I think that that's something that people don't realize because they see that these data centers are popping up. It's a really great, easy target when you have them being built across communities. It's happening quickly. People have misunderstanding about what AI is and how it's going to impact their lives. So I think that we need to do a better job at communicating exactly what all of those potential benefits may be.
What you say makes a lot of sense. And here's what I'll throw this out. And Alexandra Seymour joining us right now from the Hudson Institute. I saw her on Fox News, wanted to invite her on our program. I think the data center industry has been arrogant. I think they've been non-communicative. I think they haven't paid attention to the needs of communities. I think they've been robber barons coming in, and I think they built some monstrosities in places without communicating and giving the community's input of where you're going to build these massive buildings. But I also think that this Commonwealth of Virginia gets billions of dollars in tax revenue, and now we're looking at every municipality. 20 municipalities are going to try to raise their sales tax 1%. Imagine if we didn't have these data centers, where we would be economically in Virginia. It is a big economic engine. So I want to acknowledge that the data centers have done a really poor job of working with communities when they come in and build these gigantic things. But I hear this all the time. The term AI data center gets thrown around. Is that really something that's different? Is it a separate kind of data center? Because whenever we throw in AI, and so many people have so much anxiety about AI, it just looks like it's another way to stack on. We don't want these. We don't know what they are, but I know I don't like AI, and now I really don't like these data centers.
Yeah, they are different in some ways, in that the chips that they use within the data centers, they are more powerful because for AI they have to support. Whereas with classical data centers, most of the ones that you do see, they support. They're not running all the time, whereas AI does run all the time, which means that it just requires more power to keep them going every day. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that cost has to go back onto specific communities. And I think that you're right, that there's a lot of gaps in communication here, whether it is the data center builders themselves not communicating or coordinating well with local communities. You're starting to see a recognition of that, where some of them are starting to try and invest in this and to reach out to states. That's still going to take some time, just given the national backlash. But it also comes down to the local communities making sure that they can communicate the value of what AI does for the broader economy, what it does for local economies. And AI it's set to have massive impacts if we build it outright for the economy. It could drive medical breakthroughs. People are already using it every day. If you've gone on to ChatGPT or Claude, or name whichever model that you like to use to help you with your workflow. So I think that part of it is that there are still some applications that are not fully realized, and it is going to take building up this infrastructure. And I think the most important thing to note is that if we do not build up this infrastructure here, that is not going to stop AI. It is not going to stop the build out. What's going to happen is you're going to start seeing them built overseas. And if we start seeing them built overseas, then that just means that we have less oversight of how to actually shape the direction of this very transformative technology that will have impacts for our economy, for our national security, because it means that we don't have oversight of physical security measures, cybersecurity measures of really important assets, those chips that I was talking about earlier, the intellectual property, the data that's going through. So I think that is another aspect that is just not spoken about as much is, well, if we were to pause development or we were not to build data centers here, then what would that broader impact be? Now, we need to be much, much more thoughtful. And I think that this inflection point that we have seen across the country where so many are starting to just have a quick backlash to the build out. I think we need to look at the numbers and see really what data centers have done for local economies and make sure that we are being thoughtful so that there is buy-in from communities about where they are being built and that they have a clear understanding of how the data centers are going to be able to take on the cost of the additional resources.
You know, when I hear Bernie Sanders saying, well, let's just stop AI, put a moratorium on it, that's great. If you do it here in the United States, they're not going to do it in China. They're not going to do it in Russia. And if you want to fall behind, that's the easiest way to do it. So here's the big thing. You just heard Greg Abbott. What I'm telling people, Alexandria, is we need leadership. We don't need people just wanting to stick their head in the ground. We don't want to have people that just instinctively say no. Abbott's putting a pause. He's asking questions that I think need to be asked. So let me ask you this. I hear so much about the electricity, but Donald Trump just said yesterday, hey, I gave them the okay. You could build your own nuclear power plant next to it. You could build those small reactors next to it. You can have your own power so you don't affect the rest of the community. I hear so much about water, but I know when I've done my research, the original data centers used a ton of water. Now that the technology has gotten better and they're recycling, they don't use as much water as the original ones. So tell me something. When we're looking at the impact of a community, of resources of a community, what's true and what are urban myths that we keep hearing repeated over and over again?
Yeah, let's start with energy. So to your point, President Trump and the White House, they put out something that was called the Ratepayer Protection Pledge. And what they did with this was that they brought a ton of companies across the board, utility providers, state and local leaders, to sign on to this pledge to say, if we are going to build a new AI data center, then that data center developer has to bring the energy source with them. So the transmission lines, basically to make sure that we're not putting more strain on the grid. So they would be running that energy source locally just for the data center. So that's a good thing. That doesn't put the cost back on consumers. On the water side, I think there are a number of things that are being done. You're absolutely right that we have seen a lot of innovation in this space to reuse the water.
1 minute.
We've also had a lot of the big data center developers pledge that they are going to be net positive on water, which means that by 2030, which means that they're going to put more water back into the community than they use to power these data centers. I think it's also worth noting that while they do use more water than the classical data centers, the amount of water that data centers still take is much lower than some other things that we see across society. For example, almond farming, it takes 1 gallon of water just to make a single almond. So there, it is a massive, and I think for data centers in 2023, I believe, was when one of the last times that they were putting out numbers. It was about 228 gallons of water over the course of for all of the data centers in the United States for the year. Now, granted, that number is going to go up a bit because we're going to have more AI data center build out. But
we're going to scale up.
Right, as we continue to scale up. So, but because we're also implementing these other methods at the same time of innovating better ways to do cooling in the data centers and to use recycled water or to put more water back into the communities, you will see some of those impacts level out. So it is just something to keep in mind that when we say it's a lot of resource use, we do have to put it into context against other things. And that the almond farming was just one example, but
golf courses, almond farming, there's a lot that they'll take a lot of water, but it seems like this is the one that people need to go after. And I'll leave you at this, Alexandria. My dad used to collect classic cars. We had like a 56 Chevy. It's a beautiful car. I look at that car and then I get in my modern SUV that's built 5 years ago. the technology in it is worlds apart. Technology is growing so fast. Whatever complaints we have right now, it seems like you're talking about a complaint from 5 minutes ago when the thing's gone at light speed and moved past all of that. So if we think that these data centers aren't going to be able to grow and adapt technology wise, then I think you'd still be driving my dad's 56 Chevy.
Yep, absolutely. I think that is the other part of this is that as we're building out the data centers, it's also enabling the technology to allow us to get better and to improve the technologies and the methods that can actually make these data centers even more energy efficient.
They're not perfect, and we still have to work on them, but I'm looking for leadership. Alexandra, can we do this again?
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
I appreciate you coming on the program with us. Alexandra Seymour, Hudson Institute. We'll podcast this as well if you want to listen to it. All right, coming up on the program, we'll have Richmond's Morning News Brief, and we'll check in with Delegate Tom Garrett for our Capitol Square, insider report coming up this morning on Richmond Morning News. Quick reminder, today's program brought to you by Pearson Signature Dealerships. You know what? I was talking about my dad's old car. Could you imagine if you were one of the first customers to ever walk into Pearson Signature Dealerships